The NHL preseason is over. Next up, the regular season. How will the Lightning be prepared for their first regular NHL season without Steven Stamkos?
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Lightning. Thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, this is the podcast for you. Presented by Indeed today. Make sure to go there. Visit Indeed.com/lockedon if you need to hire. And for special discounts on posting jobs for hires. And we are also presented by FanDuel, best place to go to make your bets for the upcoming NHL season, which starts in about a week. I'm Josh Sperber, and that is the first thing that we're going to discuss. The preseason is over with the Hurricane Milton on the way to the Tampa Bay area. The Lightning thought it best to cancel their final preseason game, scheduled to be the potential Amalie Arena return of Steven Stamkos in the preseason, as it was supposed to be Lightning versus Predators. That was also a rescheduled game from Helene that was initially supposed to be played on Friday, the 27th of September. That was postponed, but now this one has been canceled. And the next game for the Lightning is in the regular season. They will be opening their season on October 11th against the Carolina Hurricanes, who they played their final preseason game against on Friday, the 4th of October. The second period were where both goals were scored with 5 minutes remaining in the period. The Hurricanes got goal number one. Anthony Cirelli got the assist from Brandon Hagel in about 3 minutes later in the period. And then an overtime goal, second overtime loss in a row for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Both times Andrei Vasilevskiy has started in goal. The Bolts have ended up falling in overtime. And Vasilevskiy, 15 saves out of 16 shots. Jonas Johansson split the game with him, saved 17 of 18, playing slightly more than Vasilevskiy as he got the overtime period. And that is who the Lightning will face in game number one after two preseason losses to the Carolina Hurricanes. The Lightning have a home-and-home with Carolina on the 11th and 12th to start off the regular season. Now, I think it is actually good that the Hurricanes were a team that the Lightning have faced, and that is who they get to start their season with. Gives Lightning a little bit of familiarity, I'd say, when they start their season in a week, really, less than a week. And with a young team like this, I think it is a good idea for it will. It's a good situation for Tampa to be playing against a team that they're pretty familiar with. You had one of those Carolina games that was mostly played just with the backups and more starters, and some of the more regular players that you expect to see a bit more came in the second game in Carolina this past Friday, and they got some good run. Brandon Hagel got on the score sheet for the first time in his second game of the preseason. He is someone we're going to be talking about later in the segment, but I think it was just not the end that they wanted, but certainly some positives to take from the Lightning. Killed all 5 power plays that the Hurricanes got, but were 0 for 4 on their power play opportunities and kept the score close. And despite being doubled in terms of shots, 34 shots, 2 goals for the Hurricanes, 17 shots and 1 goal for the Lightning. So efficiency-wise, you like what you see for Tampa Bay, but that score sheet doesn't really I don't think it really shows how far apart that game was. I mean, if you see Carolina, a team that did control the puck for the majority of the game, though the Lightning did win faceoffs for the third straight game. That's a definite positive. And that second period where the goals were scored 15 shots from the Hurricanes, just 3 for the Lightning. So the efficiency is certainly something that you like to see. But I mean, really, with all the preseason games over, we'll talk about some of the roster cuts and how those guys might shape up into it in a little bit. But the only question that I'm asking, and something I'll probably be asking you guys all week, is, are the Tampa Bay Lightning ready for the regular season? And I honestly can see a yes and a no. There's the obvious point in the no column that, it's hard to replace a player like Steven Stamkos. That's something I don't want to get into too much, considering that's been most of what I've been talking about since I started here. But I mean, it's still a factor. It is still, preseason or not, NHL regular season hockey and preseason hockey are two different things. And, the Lightning fared pretty well. They were able to show their offensive potential in a couple different games during the preseason, but how can that translate to the regular season? It's not just, minutes hungry prospects, guys looking to prove themselves and earn themselves a place on the NHL roster. It's guys who are already there playing against other NHL level players. It is now, the rosters are almost down to regular capacity. On Sunday morning, the Lightning reduced their training camp roster by 9. That's going to be in our next segment. But, I mean, just how ready is this team for opening night? And I think there's still some work to be done. I don't want to say they're not ready, but I don't want to say they're ready yet either. I mean, the roster is obviously a portion of it that is, just once we get a look at, I think, at a full roster, which I think we have a pretty good look at with the recent cuts. But, the full roster is certainly going to change things. There's 2 goalies on the current roster, but it's just a lot of young players. And I think the Lightning did a good job of separating of the newer guys they've got, some of the prospects from the guys that might make an impact this year. But I mean, there's still just a lot of guys who don't have a lot of games under their belt with each other. And I think the chemistry certainly looked really good in the preseason games that I've been able to watch. The Lightning's chemistry looked very good. So there's definitely ways that I think the Lightning are at or even ahead of schedule for where they'd want to be at the beginning point of a pretty much rebuilding season, in, a season that changes the look of the franchise, really, a big turning point in the Lightning as an organization. I think there's a lot more riding on this season than you see at face value, and you see plenty at face value. But I think the Lightning aren't going to be fully ready for the season until, midway through the first month, I think, because it's still just getting these guys together. And preseason, you're not always on the same lines as you're going to be in the regular season. It's going to be developing in some ways, chemistry with different players. And it's different guys in the locker room. If one of the younger guys was more comfortable because he had a bunch of other his former teammates at Syracuse or somewhere next to him, it's more than likely that most of those other guys are back in Syracuse now. The Lightning have really been getting a lot of guys different shifts in preseason, and that, I think, has been one of the positives. Tampa Bay, losing their franchise player, their captain and everything, they've been able to look at a lot of different guys. And I feel like the defensive lines during the preseason haven't looked that different than in each game. It's maybe just been one person switching in and out of a line or two, but the defensive lines have seemed pretty constant. It's been the offensive lines that really have been kind of all over the place. And the Lightning have done a really great job of getting some of their prospects some significant minutes in the preseason, just to, get them somewhat acclimated to what NHL level is going to be like. And I think that was a huge, huge positive for the Lightning in the preseason. But I mean, I'm just surprised that you didn't see more games. And part of it was the 2 postponed Nashville games. Both of those games were possibilities that you'd see some of the more starters. And obviously the rescheduling tonight's game that was supposed to be played, that is a big loss in terms of the Lightning not getting the minutes for those starters. But they're just relying, I think, on Nikita Kucherov's leadership to kind of help right that offensive ship. But I still think that it's going to be a bit before we see the kind of up-tempo, the kind of, high-octane offense that we've seen from the Lightning over the past couple of years until it gets to full strength. So it might be a bit of a slow start to the regular season, I think, for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But, I mean, just looking at this team, looking at the way that they operate together, they're going to be a really sneaky team in the NHL this season once things that get clicking. But I think my biggest takeaway from the preseason is that it's going to be a slow start to the Tampa Bay Lightning season. And hopefully it gets righted quickly so they can still contend at postseason playoffs. We will be right back here on Locked On Lightning talking about some more roster cuts, as the Lightning are now 3 players away from the league minimum. Who made the cut? Who went down? Who's going to survive the next one? We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to any other job sites, according to a recent survey from Indeed. Now, I have used Indeed to get a couple of jobs, and one of the things I really like is not just how easy the site is to use, especially if, you've been applying for a bunch of the same kind of jobs. The online application all looks the same. Indeed makes it really easy to use and really streamlines the parts that you need to focus on and, just invest your time in. And I've never used it to hire anyone, but in terms of getting a job, it's very easy to use. And they keep in contact with you. They keep sending you reminders about other jobs like that, like the one you applied for, that it might suit you. And that has been really helpful in my job searching days as well. And don't forget, listeners of Locked On Lightning will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. So just go to that link. It's below, Indeed.com/lockedon right now, and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Lightning. Go to Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. And one of the places that I was able to be introduced to since working here was a Joint Chiropractic. I've been looking for a chiropractor for as long as possible because my back is a lot older than I look. And after even just one session at the Joint, I have already been feeling a lot better. They gave me a very detailed stretching program. The doctor was very knowledgeable, and he made it really easy to identify the problems that I had and what he could do to fix them. And in any of their 23 Tampa locations, I'm sure that you can find the right plan for you. The Joint Chiropractic will definitely come highly recommended. And if you look below, get your first visit for $19 at Buccaneers.com/fans/contents and promotions to get a good start. And if you want to just feel healthy, looser, more limber, the Joint Chiropractic is the place to go. Josh Sperber back on Locked On Lightning, and the Tampa Bay Lightning chopped up their rosters once again. Second round of roster cuts comes the day before what was supposed to be the preseason finale. Now the preseason is over, and the following 9 Lightning players will be beginning the season in the minor leagues. Ethan Gauthier is going to start the season in Drummondville in the QMJHL. The other 8 will go to Syracuse. Declan Carlisle, Dylan Duke, Gage Gonzalez, who is currently injured, Maxime Groshev, Steven Santini, who had assists against Carolina, Gabriel Sturck, who was called up right before Carolina, Matt Tompkins, the goalie, and Jesse Ilonen all 8 of those to Syracuse, and Gautier to Drummondville in the QMJHL. Currently, the Lightning have 16 forwards on their rosters, 8 defensemen, 2 goalies. So one thing that we can say for sure, Jonas Johansson and Andrei Vasilevsky, the 2 goalies that will be suiting up for the Tampa Bay Lightning on opening day, I would be willing to bet a hefty sum that Andrei Vasilevsky will be the starter, barring injury. Hopefully, I'm right about that, because I'm a big fan of Vasilevsky. I think he's pretty key to the Lightning this season. Defenders, there are some pretty obvious ones. Eric Cernak, Ryan McDonough expect to be line 2 after line number 1 of Victor Hedman and J.J. Moser. The third line has been shaping up to be Emil Lilleberg and Darren Radish, with Radish used on power play lines as well. But Nick Perbix and Max Crozier, the other 2 in the mix on defense. And as for the Lightning, we're going to talk about the projected second line of Anthony Cirelli, Cam Atkinson, and Brendan Hagel. The first 2 lines are certainly seemingly set in stone for Tampa Bay. The others, not so much. A big, big piece of news on the roster is that Connor Geekie, even though he was slapped with a 1-game suspension, he would have been suspended for the preseason finale, had it, if it was scheduled to be played still, tonight against Nashville. Of course, that game no longer, and Connor Geekie still surviving the roster cuts. So he is still in the mix to make opening day. Now, I don't know how the suspension is going to impact his role. I certainly think he has done enough in training camp to show that he belongs on opening day. Again, he's still young. He's still 19, 20 years old. 20 years old. I'm just bad at math, but he's still 20 years old. He'd still benefit, I think, from some AHL, from some minor league experiences. He has not had any NHL minutes besides the preseason, but he's really shown it all. He's scored. He's assisted. He's made some big hits, and that fight was part of his suspension, I'm sure. But, I mean, he's been a great teammate. He's already got the respect of the guys in the locker room. The coaches have been absolutely raving about a 20-year-old with such advanced skill, 6'4", 207 frame as well. So a big, solid guy. It certainly seems like he is NHL ready, but obviously no further movement on that front. The only 2 injured players that are listed as injured on the roster, Gabriel Fortier and Jack Finley. Non-rostered injured, Michael Eissimont and Luke Glendening, both expected to miss opening night, but there is a chance that they come around. So the Lightning are really starting to round out their lineups, their roster. Again, I think the defense seems pretty clear. There might be some contention for that other third line defense spot, but now it's really a matter of who's going to come in and be some of the backups. But, you know, a lot of things can change between now and next week. The end of the week, Thursday, the 11th, I believe, is when the Lightning's opening day game is. And some other good names to see on there is Zemgus Girgensons. Obviously, he had been in the NHL for a while, only with Buffalo, so the Lightning still have some veteran presence on there. But really, I mean, the only name that really has been standing out on this training camp roster is Connor Geekie. I feel like if you look at that, it's just the big wild card when it comes to it. And it does seem like with Eissimont's health in question, he could start the season in the AHL, and they'd still have 2 more after him to, get the roster down. At least one of those, I think, is going to be on defense. My guess would it be Max Crozier is going to begin the season in the AHL. But I mean, after that, it's kind of difficult. There still seems to be that one spot. And I think, honestly, I'd love to say that Connor Geekie is going to make it to the major league roster or to the NHL roster. But I mean, just looking at the guys on the list, it just seems risky to bring a rookie right into the thick of things before he's had any real NHL experience, as advanced as he is. So he could come down, and then between Isamont, Mitchell Chaffee, I think, will get sent down, one or maybe both of those. But I mean, those are, I think, looking at the forwards, Chaffee, Isamont, and Geeky are the only guys that I might consider sending down. And on defense, Max Crozier seems likely to start with the AHL club in Syracuse. The rest I'd expect on the defensive line to be starting. So the defense is mostly settled. It's the forwards that I think we're going to have the most turnover. And depending on how serious Isamont's injury is, there is still a chance we could see Connor Geeky on the NHL roster. I think he's earned his place. I don't know. I still don't know if he's going to make it, though. I think the Lightning might and probably should play it safe and start him in Syracuse. But again, whether it's on opening night or later on in this season, sometime before the end of 2025 regular season, Connor Geeky will have made at least one appearance with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I still maintain that position. But he is not the Lightning forward that we're going to be talking about in our final segment of the show. We've obviously talked a lot about the top forward line. Now let's take a look at the second forward line and how that is going to be a big impact with Brandon Hagel turning some heads in his short start to the preseason. Now, I personally am not a huge sports bettor, but I know all of my friends that use that do sports betting, they use FanDuel, and I think you should too. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more wherever you place your bets on FanDuel. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Yes, $200 guaranteed in bonus bets when you place your first bet of just $5. That is FanDuel.com. And we'll have updated ads for you later in the week as we get ready to start, or odds, I should say, as we get ready to start the NHL season. Now, here is going to be a key line for the Tampa Bay Lightning, that second forward line. I don't think we need to go into too much detail of how potent line #1 on the Lightning can be. Kucherov, Point, and Gensel. I think it really depends on Gensel, considering that, we've seen what Point and Kucherov can do on the same line. Together, they combined for 100 goals scored, and that's not even including the assists, which is closer to 200. So so much offensive talent there. If Gensel fits in like I expect him to, then that first line could be one of the best in all of hockey. But something that I noticed in the preseason, and a lot of it I think had to do with the fact that Lightning are playing some of their prospects, but that the depth behind line #1, I think, needs to be focused on for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Because that first line can't do it all. When you have guys that talented, on some teams, you can see that you can just see it. You can just see the team just kind of hoping that the star boys, the star players will just kind of carry it. And that just isn't winning formula. I don't think that's something that the Lightning are going to be doing. I just don't think that's just not Tampa Bay Lightning hockey. So starting with that second line, I think, is where the Lightning really need to see some guys step up. And a big linchpin of that, I think, is Cam Atkinson, because Brennan Hagel and Anthony Cirelli have both, they've been around for a while. They're two guys that, are familiar with the Lightning system. Hagel has been here now for 2.5 seasons. And with Anthony Cirelli, he was drafted here in 2015. He's approaching his 10th season with Tampa. Two vets, and I think having a guy like Cam Atkinson to just get him, accustomed to Tampa Bay Lightning hockey with two big veterans is huge. And then the next two lines might just be some prospects and Luke Glendening just for some extra, fourth line toughness like you'd see on a Cal Clutterbuck of the Islanders or, something like that. Just a nice kind of energy veteran guy there. But it's that second line that I think can be really intriguing because Brandon Hagel looked great in the preseason. And I'm not trying to knock him and say that he is, anything less than a very good hockey player. I mean, you've got to be some level of elite to get into the NHL. And, he's certainly got the skills, but he's just not, a huge name kind of guy. But the last two seasons, he has been a pillar of consistency with a combined plus-minus of 24, playing all but one regular season games for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the last 2 years after playing 22 following the trade from the Chicago Blackhawks at the deadline. And the last two seasons, he's combined for almost 120 points. And it's, I think he can be a big impact player. He's still only 26 years old, nearing his prime. I mean, he hasn't exactly had bad seasons, but he's had a 30-goal season and last year with an almost 50-assist season. So he is someone that I'm looking on that second line to be primed for a breakout. And I think a big season from Brandon Hagel can kind of have a trickle-down effect and just kind of help the Lightning on their lower lines just, get up to that level of the first line. Because the Lightning defense has been a big focus for Tampa throughout preseason and everything like that. But just the way that this team is, the offense is really going to have to shoulder a lot of the load. And that's got to start with depth. I mean, so I'm looking for a breakout year from Brandon Hagel to kind of lead that second line. I mean, he has really just got that leadership sort of swagger about him in the locker room. And I think that's just what the Lightning need now more than ever is just as many guys as you can just stepping up and, taking matters into their own hands. Obviously, Victor Hedman's still the captain of the team, but you still need leaders on a locker room, whether there are more letters on your jersey than NHL. And I think you have two guys who are big-time leaders and guys who have been there for a while for Tampa, and Anthony Cirelli and Brandon Hagel on that second line. So I think with the most veteran presence, adding Cam Atkinson into that mix, who's had a solid career for a couple of NHL teams, including the Flyers, I think you just have a nice veteran line that I think is pretty perfect to back up the likes of Nikita Kucherov as he chases another potential Hart Trophy and Norris Trophy and all the offensive trophies, because you've got to think he's eligible for that. I mean, we talked about Brandon Point. I think he's ready to have a big goal-scoring season, take some of that extra load from Steven Stamkos. And if Jake Gensel continues to do what he has done, then that first line is going to be unstoppable. And, there'll be teams who can, focus more on their offense that they might think they can do that when the other lines in the Lightning come in. And I think, having the second most line with the second most playing time with a bunch of veterans, including two guys who have been with the Lightning for almost 10 years combined in Cirelli and Hagel, I think that would be just a really nice boost for the Tampa Bay Lightning offense. So you'd expect that first line to really shoulder a lot of the weight. But if the Lightning can still get some meaningful offensive plays from the likes of Cirelli, Hagel, and Atkinson, I think that would be key for the Tampa Bay Lightning season. And that is really going to be my line to watch, because like I've said, I think, we've all seen what that Lightning first line can do. These are all established veteran players, whereas, you've got guys coming off the bench in the second line who are really, I think, in the kind of make or break sort of, let's make a name for myself kind of season. And I think you have that in Hagel and Cirelli. And with those Lightning vets leading a line with a lot of veteran talent, that could be a pleasant surprise in helping the Lightning I think shock the people. There are definitely people who think the Lightning are going to miss the playoffs after losing Stamkos, but that second line is really going to have to show that they have a nice extra addition of talent that I think is going to give the Lightning offense a big, big boost in this upcoming season. But we'll have more to talk about on this season on tomorrow's podcast. Josh Sperber here, thanking you all for making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. Now for your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league opponents with daily tips from Steele and Flint. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to draft some Lightning players onto your fantasy hockey team like Nikita Kucherov, Victor Hedman. Might have Connor Geeky if you're in a dynasty league, have him as a keeper. That's my big fantasy tip of the day. But that's all for today, though. Josh Sperber signing off here on Locked On Lightning. Thank you all for tuning in. Go Bolts, and we'll see you tomorrow.